Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we've got a couple more beers that we've sourced from Tavour, and we are doing a fruited beer review today. Two completely different directions, but both with a common element of fruit. So first on the docket, we're starting with Drekker Brewing Company's Key Lime Pie Sling du Jour. This is a sour ale that is flavored with other ingredients to make it taste like key lime pie. I'll give you the full ingredients list when we get to the full review. But this one clocks in at 6.5% ABV, and Drekker Brewing Company is based out of Fargo, North Dakota. Moving on to number two. Number two is from a brewer I've never had anything from prior, so I'm certainly looking forward to jumping in and seeing what they're about. This is Fair State Brewing Cooperative's Plant-Based. This is classified as a fruit ale, 5.4% ABV on this one. They are based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this beer is vegan. It's got a lot of different fruit in it, and it's kind of supposed to be like a smoothie-like ale. So I, again, will give you the full list of what they added when we get to the review on this specific beer. So we're looking at one fruited sour and one fruited kind of smoothie-like beer. Drekker I've had before. Fair State Brewing Cooperative I never had. So we're going to jump right in and see what both of these beers are about. So without further ado, jump in with Drekker Brewing Company's Key Lime Pie Sling du Jour, the Key Lime Pie Sour Ale, clocking in at 6.5% ABV. Okay, so jumping right in with the first beer of today's fruited beer review, we have got Drekker Brewing Company's Key Lime Pie Sling du Jour. This is a key lime pie flavored sour ale. They are based out of Fargo, North Dakota, and this one does clock in at 6.5% ABV. We've done a few Drekker beers, all of which I've gotten from Tavour, this one included. I know I've done some big IPAs they had, and what I remember is that they were very good, but they also had quite unique and interesting ingredient bills. So we will go through and tell you exactly what all is in this one. But first, in terms of label art, this is kind of a funky looking label. I'm not sure exactly what to make of it, but it looks kind of crazy. Nonetheless, in terms of ingredients, because they give you their full ingredient bill, I guess this is a theme that they do. All the ones I've tried have had this. For malts, they used pale two-row and oat. So a good basic clean malt bill for a sour beer. Hops, Hallertau Blanc. So again, we're looking at a lighter hop that's in here that's not going to have a ton of alphas to extract a bunch of bitters into it. They also added a lactobacillus culture and used house ale yeast in this for the fermentation. And then the ancillary ingredients, which makes this key lime pie, they added lime, graham crackers, cinnamon, nutmeg, brown sugar, lactose, and vanilla bean. So it's a sour that's got a little lactose to add a little sweetness and accentuate out these other flavors, which hopefully will indeed make this come across as key lime pie would. Which if it does, I'm in for a treat because it's one of my absolute favorite pies. It probably is my favorite pie in the world of them all. I'm fortunate living in Tampa, Florida, that it's very easy to get key lime pies here, and indeed you can get great key lime pie pretty much all over the state. But nonetheless, we're talking about beer, so let's get this one cracked gently and poured right in the glass. Okay, as expected with that malt bill, it is nice and light, which is probably a good call for what they're trying to do with this beer, in my opinion. It is a sour, so I don't expect it's going to do much in the way of a head nor hold one. It made a little bit, nothing crazy. I was reasonably gentle because I don't want my poor pouring skills to have any part in that, but nonetheless, hold it up to the light. It is a nice clear beer and it's a very pale yellow. Puts me in mind of, say, a Saison, a farmhouse ale, Berliner Weisse, something light like that. It's got a very light malt base. Let's give it a sniff. Oh, wow. You can definitely smell the lime in here, and I am absolutely picking up a little bit of that vanilla that they added in. That's about the two aromas that I can detect. I know it's got cinnamon and nutmeg. Okay, yeah, I can pick up the cinnamon as well, so They're playing up with that graham cracker crust, and they did put graham crackers in here, so I'm hoping that this really comes out like liquid key lime pie, which would be a real treat. It's just delicious. All right, looks great, smells great. Let's jump right in. Oh, wow. Okay, wow, yeah. My gut reaction is they nailed it. This absolutely puts me in mind of eating a fresh slice of key lime pie, and it is positively delicious. Okay, so first get it in your mouth, you get this nice tart sour kick, which very much is what happens with key lime pie. It's key lime. It's got sour and it's got tart. And next thing I thought about was they didn't overdo it. It's got the right kick for the fruit and how a slice of that pie comes out, but it's not over the top. So the lactobacillus culture didn't over sour and over tart it up. It just helps to play in with that lime. Then the next thing I thought about was that lactose they added, they did just enough to accentuate the kind of dessert feel they're going for without going over the top. So it still has this nice sour tartness, and really the lactose that's added in helps to play up these other ingredients that help it make it feel and come across like a pie beer, which indeed they succeeded with flying colors. It takes a few seconds, then the tart and sour pungency of the lime gets out of the way, that sweetness starts to open up, and then all of the other flavors that they added in come into full force. So it's on the back end where you get the elements of the crust. You definitely get the graham cracker, you hands down get the cinnamon and the nutmeg, and that vanilla undertone, so it's like that the frosting or the whipping top that it's not on all key lime pies, but it is pretty common. They'll have a little dollop of some whipped cream or something like that on the top of them, and it's very, very enjoyable. No doubt, I think they absolutely got a home run on their hands with this beer. It truly, truly does put me in mind of key lime pie, and that's just a beautiful thing. This is truly, truly delicious. It's been a while since I've had a fruited beer or indeed a sour beer I've enjoyed this well. This one is really special. I'm going to jump back in and start to explore the body and mouthfeel and kind of think more on the flavor development. The body is a nice, robust medium. It is a sour, but it's a 6.5% sour, and it's got a body to it, which really sits in line with the ABV range. Mouthfeel, this one's got some thickness to it, which you don't often get with a sour, but it does have a thickness to it. Again, this is a higher ABV than your average sour, 6.5% on this one, and it definitely feels appropriate for the ABV range, but the body and the mouthfeel. And additionally, I can tell you, if you start to agitate this beer around the palate, let the flavors move all around, it does get creamy, and it's a silky creamy. Not a super, super thick creamy. It doesn't thicken like a milkshake-like mouthfeel, but it just gets really silkily creamy. And it's very, very nice. It feels nice, and gosh, it just tastes so good. I wish you could taste this beer. I wish you could taste it. I hope that my reaction is doing it justice, because honestly, this beer is freaking delicious. It is freaking delicious. I wish I had bought far more of these, because man, this is a special beer indeed. I'm going to jump back in again to explore these flavors and make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, it's just so good. Nice lime kick, just that nice lime kick. Then opens up to that slight sweetness. Then all of the other ingredients that they came and put in come into play once the lime starts to settle down a little bit. They kind of rise up through it, and then they pair. So you're getting residual lime mixing with the ingredients that taste like the crust and the dollop of cream on the top. And they're all just blending perfectly together. It's holding perfectly together. And then it slowly starts to decay off to the end. Now, in terms of length of finish, the intensity on the finish isn't that long, but there is quite a long residual lingering key lime and graham cracker crust kind of that lingers on the back of the palate. quite a bit longer than you would anticipate. In terms of how the finish is and the mouthfeel on the end of the sip for the sour, many, if not most sours do have a slight kind of drying effect, a slight kind of bruteness to the end. This is no different. It's very, very wet and enjoyable all the way through until really the very tail end of each sip on the end of the finish. It's quite nice. It feels very clean, very crisp. I gotta say, I think the balance in this beer is just exquisite. I think they absolutely nailed it. This is a home run of a beer. I'm loving every minute of this. I'm gonna take my time sipping on this, enjoying every last drop, and come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get to the second beer of today's fruited beer review. That is Fair State Brewing Cooperative's plant-based, a fruited ale that clocks in at 5.4% ABV. Okay, now jumping into the second beer of today's fruited beer review, we've got Fair State Brewing Cooperative's plant-based. This is a fruited ale that is vegan, 5.4% ABV, and they are based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. So, what this beer is, they call it a vegan fruit smoothie ale. This is brewed with mango, banana, blueberry, coconut, and vanilla. So, it sounds properly awesome. This is the first beer I've ever had from Fair State Brewing Cooperative, and indeed the first vegan beer I've ever had. But it sounds great, so we're going to give it a whirl. Let's get this cracked. Okay, and we're going to get this poured right in the glass. Okay, yeah, it's kind of an interesting color. Don't see too many beers that look exactly like this, that's for sure. Not sure how I would categorize this appearance, but it's got a mix of different fruit, and certainly that is imparting some fruit hues. With the blueberry mixed with mango, etc., it certainly looks thick. It kind of puts me in mind of an Urban Artifact Midwestern tart, of which we've reviewed many. It's got kind of that same look to it, so let's give it a sniff. It smells quite fruity. There's no question about it. You can smell this and it smells like a lot of different fruit kind of blended together. But I'm also getting a nice whiff of the malt bill. It smells like kind of a baked good malt bill where it's kind of biscuity and crusty. As a base for a bunch of fruit in a vegan beer, we'll see how it works. But it smells really fruity, smells good. Let's jump right in, give it a sip. Okay, wow. Yeah, that's very fruity. Their descriptor of a fruit smoothie ale really does seem quite appropriate. This is just packed with fruit. It's very fruit forward. And it's hard to say exactly what sticks out the most. It just really tastes like a big blend of a bunch of different fruit. I'm gonna have to read down the line and see if I can think. The banana does come through. It's got mango, banana, blueberry, coconut, and vanilla. The banana really does come through. The blueberry is really adding more hue than anything. I'm not getting a lot of that. Not really picking up the coconut. The mango comes through a fair bit. And there's just a hint of the vanilla that comes through. But it's dominant banana and mango. That's the two fruit that come through the most strongly, no question. I'm going to jump back in for body and mouthfeel and really think on this flavor profile. The body is a solid medium, so it's got a little extra breadth than maybe you would expect for 5.4% ABV. Mouthfeel really does have a lot more thickness to it than you would expect for the ABV range. And being that they're going for a fruit smoothie, it really feels appropriate. It's got a good body and a good mouthfeel for where they're going with it. In terms of pungency of flavor, it's pretty pungent up front, but it doesn't have a lengthy finish at all. It really dissipates quite quickly compared to your average beer. I would say even a nice crisp Pilsner has much more of a lingering quality in terms of what happens with the flavor on the end of each finish than this does. It really just kind of disappears very quickly. You get that pungency up front and then it's gone in a matter of seconds. So the length of the finish is not that great. In terms of the balance, they put all these different ingredients in there, but they're not all coming through. The coconut, notably, and the blueberry. The blueberry is clearly imparting some color to it from the depth of the skin, but it's not really doing much in terms of flavor. I'm going to jump in for another sip. Yeah, it really comes off more of a mango and banana. And there's just that hint of vanilla. And I'm not getting the coconut or the blueberry at all. I'm going to read this one more time, make sure I'm not missing any other fruit. I'm not. So really, it comes off more as a mango and banana. I would say it's roughly 50-50. Maybe the mango's a little more, maybe closer to 60-40 to the banana, but banana is easy to lose in beers and it actually does come through in this beer, which I appreciate. Banana is one of my favorite foods in the world, and I really like it in beers. It's not a common ingredient, but it comes through great. Most people know Wells Banana Bread Ale. That's a really good one for that. This is good. It's not what I expected. Full disclosure, I didn't really know what to think in terms of a vegan beer, but I'm pleasantly surprised. Even though you don't get much in terms of finish and the balance is off for letting all the ingredients speak, it's still an enjoyable beer. It's tasty. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we have gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to get them ranked. Starting with the Drekker Brewing Company's Key Lime Pie Sling du Jour. It's Key Lime Pie flavored sour ale, 6.5% ABV. They are based out of Fargo, North Dakota. So starting with the aroma. The aroma on this beer was not super pronounced. You really had to get right up in it over the glass to really kind of detect what was going to be in the beer. But once you did, you could really smell it quite clearly, and it did smell very, very good. I got a big blast of lime that came through clearly, and I got really a nice mix of the cinnamon and the nutmeg and the vanilla, and really the other base ingredients that they put in here to make it what it was. It did come through pretty clearly once you got above the glass. I would say it was on the high end of average, and it gets a 6 out of 10. For the taste, absolutely loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I think that they nailed precisely what they were going for here. They called it Key Lime Pie Sour Ale, and that's exactly what they produced. Had a nice, wonderful tart and sour kick up front, but it wasn't too much to override the key lime. And I think that the way that they put the ingredients together, adding in a little lactose to play up and accentuate the other flavors that go in to create the key lime pie, I think was a genius move. And they got a real home run on their hands here. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body was great. At 6.5%, that's a little bigger and heavier than your average sour ale. But the body came through with a really nice presence that was appropriate for the ABV range. So certainly a little higher than you would expect for the style. But for the ABV range and the fact that, you know, a key lime pie is a thick, rich, dense pie. If you've never had one, I highly recommend them. They're delicious. But really, it had some nice substance to match the ABV. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, same thing. I wouldn't say it was viscous per se, but it definitely had a thickness to it. And again, considering the ABV range and for what they were trying to mimic, it felt perfectly appropriate to me. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish on this beer was quite long. It was certainly well longer than your average sour ale. And really, for me, it was just how long all of these flavors just kept extending on the end of each sip. And it did, near the end, granted it was quite long out, get a classic slight dry quality to the end of the finish on the sip, as you get often with sours. Really, though, you were still left with all these lingering, delicious key lime pie flavors floating around the back of the palate. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the head and retention, it tried to start to make one at the beginning, then it immediately got out of the way, which in a sour ale, that's exactly what I expect and what I want to see. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, this was a positively lovely beer. It was a nice, bright, pale yellow color, which really goes perfectly for the style And certainly as a key lime pie base, I don't expect any funky colors. And based on the malt bill they chose, it really came out exactly as I anticipated. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the balance, honestly, I would not have changed a thing here. This was just beautifully, beautifully balanced and executed. The right amount of lime and cinnamon and nutmeg and brown sugar and the slight vanilla for the cream and the lactose to add just that sweetness to let all the key lime, kind of side of it play out for the pie. I think they absolutely have a home run of a beer on their hands here. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the feeling and the intangibles, I loved it. This was one of those beers where from first sip, I just think, wow, this is great. And let me think on and break down what it is I'm experiencing. And it was just fantastic. I loved it all the way around, through and through. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, there are many, many sour ales out there, many flavored sour ales, but this is among the best I have ever had. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic and that they nailed exactly what they were going for with this one. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. So that brings the total score on Drekker Brewing Company's Key Lime Pie Sling du Jour to a 96 out of 100. So this is absolute top tier sour ale status, and for what they were aiming to go for in beer form, they absolutely nailed it. If you can get your hands on this, this is one that I highly recommend to any fan of both key lime pie or just sour beers in general. You will not be disappointed. Moving on to beer number 2. This was from Fair State Brewing Cooperative. The beer is called Plant Based, and it's a fruited ale. They call it a fruit smoothie ale. 5.4% ABV on this one, based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. This was a vegan beer, first vegan beer I've ever had, and the first beer I've ever had from Fair State Brewing Cooperative. In this one, it was blueberry, banana, mango, and it did also have vanilla bean, and I'm pretty sure that's all the fruit that they put in there. Coconut. I always forget about the coconut. There's a reason for that. We'll get to it. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this one was nice. It was certainly not that pungent. It was roughly the exact same intensity as on the Drekker here. But when you got over and got it in the glass, you could smell it, and it smelled nice. It smelled fruity. Not all of the fruit came out in full force that they said they put in. I couldn't really pick up any of the coconut at all in the aroma. Just a slight hint of the blueberry. It was really dominant banana and mango. That's what came through. But it smelled nice. High end of average, it gets a 6 out of 10. For the taste. The taste was fruity. There's no question, and I see where they were going with this, calling this a fruit smoothie ale. That was probably a relatively accurate representation of what the flavor was about. But again, in tandem, considering what all that they put in there, not all of it actually came out in the flavor profile at all. Notable absence of coconut, notable absence of blueberry in the flavor, and the vanilla, just the slightest hint really, but really it was more mango and banana than anything. And not to say that wasn't enjoyable. It was very nice. Banana is one of my favorite ingredients, certainly in the world, and you don't get a lot of beers that have them in it. But frankly, to add in all these other ingredients that really never made their presence known, either in the aroma or in the flavor, it was a bit of a letdown. Overall, I just thought it was average. It gets high end. It gets a 6 out of 10. Moving on to the body. The body on this beer was excellent. Certainly for the ABV range, it felt really robust. 5.4%, that's not that high, but it did have a nice presence to the body. And really, to call it a fruit smoothie ale, it was appropriate for where they were going for. It gets a 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel. Same story here. This beer really had quite a lot of thickness to it, considering the ABV range, 5.4. Same story with the mouthfeel as the body, and for the same reason, it gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Moving on to the finish. The finish on this beer was disappointing, to put it mildly. It was such a short length and experience on each sip. I was really quite surprised because there was a lot of flavor that was in this beer, albeit not well represented across all ingredients they put in. The balance was another story, but it was, nice. It just hit you up front and it was almost immediately gone. There was really no finish, so to speak, and it didn't linger around the palate to really let you think that hard on what it was you were tasting. That, I think, was a bit of a disservice to the beer. It just gets a 2 out of 10. head and retention. Head and retention on this one, they call it a fruit smoothie beer, and it has a lot of ingredients in it. And I really did expect it to produce a head, you know, kind of slush up and thicken, and it just didn't do that. It did form a little bit of a head, but not much. Again, it gets another 2 out of 10. For the appearance. The appearance on this beer, I guess, was okay. It was occluded, which I expected for something they call a fruit smoothie. But frankly, it was not what I would term a lovely beer. You might even say it was a little off-putting. The color of it was almost kind of dirty water or rust colored. And I think probably the bulk of that came from the blueberry skins kind of darkening up, but it wasn't that lovely to look at. I did give it above average though. Can't fault it for the ingredient bill they put in. It gets a 7 out of 10. Moving on to the balance. The balance on this beer, this is another category. I did not think that they did the beer a service, and it really did come down to the balance of ingredients across many other subcategories as well. I got the banana, I got the mango. The coconut was essentially completely absent in both terms of flavor and in terms of the aroma. Same thing with the vanilla, and really that kind of put me at a loss. Like, okay, I've got all these other ingredients in here, but where are they? I couldn't pick them out, I couldn't experience them, and frankly, the finish was so short that none of those flavors really had a chance to open up and develop if they even were to be found in the beer. This for me is just unbalanced, and I'm sorry, it gets a 3 out of 10. Moving on to the feeling and the intangible. I didn't hate the beer. I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was bad overall. For me, I just thought it was at an average beer drinking experience, and I rated it accordingly. It gets a 5 out of 10. Finally, as an example of this style, there's a whole lot of fruit beers out there, and I did bear in mind that, yes, this is vegan. I don't know what difference that may or may not make. It's the first one I've ever had, but I tried not to be too harsh. I rated exactly how I experienced. And overall, for a fruit smoothie style beer with all these big fruits in it, the lack of balance and lack of sustain on each sip really is what did it for me. I just gave it average again. It gets a 5 out of 10. That brings the total score on Fair State Brewing Cooperative's plant-based to a 56 out of 100. So it falls squarely in the average range. And we're looking at a point disparity of 40, which sounds massive, and indeed it is massive. But I think what I experienced and where the scores came out are a very accurate representation of where I think these beers kind of rank in the grand scheme. 96, this was top tier and it well deserved it. 56, this was average for me and I think it well deserved it. So really depends on what you're going for. I'm not saying one is any better than the other. I'm just telling you exactly what I experienced and where they ranked in our different categories. So there's definitely something here for different palates. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Till next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.